Welcome back to OSDLive Obsessive Sneaker Disorder. What's up, y'all? How you feeling?
What is good, soul brother number one? What's going on
Good
with
as
you?
B1.
Hi,
How we all doing?
doing great.
So here we are, back again, y'all.
Yep.
We are officially back in the driver's seat after a pretty triumphant return last week.
Yep.
The comments are rolling in, the text messages, DMs, everything. So I guess we are committed. This is it. We are officially back. There's no turning back. So we got to send a thank you to everyone getting our subscribers up, the comments, the likes, the shares, on all social media platforms where we are. Thank you very much for that. We got another great show today. But let's kick it off with what's happening. A couple of quick topics.
Yeah.
First and foremost, the extension of the Nike and NFL deal till 2038. How do we feel about that?
I'm not surprised by it. Nike's not gonna, relinquish what they've worked so hard to do. They're trying to certainly grow. They're trying to recapture some of that lightning in a bottle from the early 2000s. But this is a different time. This is 2024 on the precipice of 2025. The NFL, it's not the same. It's still considered the no fun league for me. Ever since that garbage involving the president, Colin Kaepernick, Goodell, and the pivoting, and it was just bad. So I just stopped watching. But that's okay. I know there's a lot of fans out there.
Well, I think the most interesting thing about it, and Steve can talk to this too, is track and field coach who's exposed to a lot of the brands that partake in an interesting sport. I think as far as the NFL goes, Nike read up because quite honestly, the other part of this nobody talks about is nobody else wants it.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going to go, Piper. We're saying like seeing Nike sign a long-term deal with a total league, it smacks of where Reebok was on the decline when they did it.
Mm.
It's the last grab when you know you're searching for some kind of relevance and you're not getting it on the design front. You're not getting it in the retail front. You go for the big league that locks in the big deal for equipment and clothing. And so for me, it's a kind of no where I think they got to start to pay attention because the bell is tolling when you go that route.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, and we look at what the last 20 years has brought in terms of shifts, in terms of brand sponsorships. Reebok originally had the NHL, then it switched to Adidas. Adidas had the NBA, then it switched to Nike. Reebok used to have USC, and then they didn't. And, there was a lot of brands who, at the time when they had the position and resources to pull all of these things off, they were doing them at a time when people actually cared to watch these leagues more. I think ratings for all of these leagues overall is down, and they're quite honestly. I just think we take it from the hood perspective of young kids coming up. Nobody wants to be like any of these athletes anymore. I remember young folks. We all wanted to be like someone who we watched.
Yeah.
In all of these sports. We would go outside and imitate our favorite running backs when we played football in the street.
Right.
We wanted to be like whoever it was when we were on the basketball court. Be it baseball, we wanted to be the Reggie Jacksons and everybody else.
Right.
The young demographic, up and coming athletes want to be themselves. And when you put NIL in the mix, where everybody has the opportunity to be themselves and get paid for being themselves before they even reach a league, there's no interest there in being the aspirational league player. It's just a step along the way now. And it's starting to show in the ratings and how much interest there is in actually sitting down to watch all of these sports.
That's a great point. Personal branding, social media. It used to be that you would have to go through. Look what NBA did to Iverson. It used to have to be that you had to go through the league steps to get known. And if you were anything of your own brand, your own person, your own style, they would try to squash it as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Now that is the currency. how
Mhm.
much of an individual you are, how much of a following do you have. So you reaching the fans does not go through jersey sales anymore.
Nope.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, you look at an organization like Overtime, which is
Mm,
literally right here around the corner from where we are at the academy. They're the largest Gen Z sports multimedia company out here. They have their own network on streaming channels. I just watched last week. You know, there's a whole documentary series on Carmelo's son,
Right.
an entire documentary series. He
That's
hasn't played
wild.
in a league.
That's
He's
wild.
not in college.
That's wild.
yeah.
He has an entire series.
That's
So
wild.
there's literally no real interest in being as aspirationally accomplished
Mm,
as the folks in the league anymore. You
right.
can get money now.
Yeah.
So that's all affecting the interest there is from these brands in actually signing these big deals. And,
Right.
you know, Nike signing off on, you know, a re-up to the NFL, the rest of the brands are like, okay, good.
We'll do
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
You
like, go
take
do it.
that.
You
You
take it.
take that.
Right.
Right.
But it's because the fans now want, just like you said earlier, the fans want to know the players, the athletes more. They want to know the off the field, off the court, off the pitch stuff. What happens behind the scenes? What's their family situation like?
Yeah.
Like we got to see with a number of documentaries with say Aunt Edwards and LeBron and everything on Netflix. That was really telling because we were able to see a day in the life, like what it
Well,
means to pack up and, hit the road and touch the road so often and
yeah.
not be away from your family and even your animals.
Well, in
Yeah.
us in this generation, in our generation, we saw when this happened. When
Mm,
the Dream Team were wearing flags over their uniform
yeah,
sponsor,
Mhm.
that's when it happened. That was the moment when having a major league or a whole brand with your logo on the chest and the athlete themselves could cover it,
yeah.
it was over at that point.
Or even when they
So,
pulled the play of blocking Patrick Ewing sneakers because they weren't Nike. So
Yep.
they positioned them so that his shoes wouldn't show and it was his own
Yep.
brand.
Yep.
So it's the time will tell, you
yeah,
know. But next topic,
yeah,
real quick, Adidas is putting out a documentary called Under the Tongue. It's actually out now, full documentary on YouTube
yeah.
about their world famous Predator soccer boot. So
Mm,
those of us, whether we have played on the pitch or not, we are aware of the global success of the
absolutely.
Predator soccer boot and
Absolutely.
its various iterations and people who've worn it and all the related moments that are attached to it. So Adidas says, and I think salute to them, to
Absolutely.
actually make a documentary for something so iconic in their very long line and history of footwear. So what do
Yeah.
you guys think about that?
Yeah. It
Yeah.
it was really good. And we think about the Predator from 1994, and like you said, the different iterations. Um, Adidas was hurting, and in the documentary, we actually hear employees talk about them trying to find their footing. No pun intended. And it took basically an Australian to come up with this new design. Who he himself, is a player, former player from Newcastle, and actually coming up and kind of doing very similar to what we saw Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman do with the waffle trainer. But he actually created, over here for Adidas by actually taking, the rubber off of a paddle and putting it on, these soccer boots.
Yeah.
They became a game changer. I mean, we know all the players, be it Beckham, be it, the only player that really messed it up for them, let's be honest, was Messi because when he started wearing the F50,
Yep.
everyone's,
Yep.
It went
the
that
focus
way.
shifted.
Yep.
But the Predator,
But even with the advent of the F50, now I mean, you're not a superhero until you got a supervillain. You needed a balance. So
right?
it became the debate of who was better, which was better. So you got, all the Adidas athletes wearing the Predator and
Yeah,
then Messi messing it up. And that made it a rivalry not just in skill or team, but in equipment. And I
yeah,
think that elevated the Predator because they needed a foil to play against because they were for a minute they were ubiquitous. Like that
yeah.
was the boot.
Everyone wanted a pair of those. everyone,
Yep.
especially the white and gold pair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's out now on
Yeah.
YouTube. Under the Tongue, the full documentary is available. And up next, we have the prettiest among us, a guest today. Hello there. How are you? Introduce yourself to the world and all our disorderlies.
Oh, but she has to unmute.
You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you for having me. It's super exciting to be here. That was a super interesting discussion. I was surprised to hear you all be sort of like, I did not expect you to say that about the NFL deal. So that was super interesting.
Yeah.
Welcome to
things have changed.
OSD.
I'm sorry?
What'd you say, D?
I said things have changed with the NFL, and we're not afraid to talk about it.
definitely.
You know, the numbers, we're going to dig into the numbers in a future episode, that as well as other professional leagues like the NBA. But yeah, Lois, it's so great to have you on the show.
Very great
It's
to
a
be here.
long time coming.
Yeah.
But so tell us, give us a quick snapshot, please, of your background. You're a writer, you're co-founder of Snobette. Where did it begin for you, though? How did you become a sneaker analyst writer?
Okay. I mean, I have two jobs, really. The bread and butter job is that I'm the director of retail for OTR Global. It's a research firm, and we do put out reports on athletic brands. And then I'm also the co-founder with Samia Grandpierre of Snobette. That grew out of High Snobiety. High Snobiety had a woman's silo called High Snobette, which they chose not to go forward with. So when they shut down High Snobette, Sami and I started Snobette. How this evolved for me, like I've been a reporter reporting on the sneaker and streetwear space since the 90s. So like I've always been a writer and always been someone who's reported on the space. So that's kind of a quick background for me. So
you've seen the sneaker, culture and everything has evolved, over the decades.
Yes, a lot.
How has social media and even the whole resale market really affected things?
I mean, what do you mean by how the old resale market has affected things?
Well, the old, not even the old resale market, just the resale market in general, because it's had an impact on how, sneakers are being reported, the numbers, but also how people, digest sneaker culture now too, because it's become almost like it has to have a resale value in order to move the needle. Is that the case? Has that always been the case?
I look at sneaker culture, which obviously its roots go back to like 70s, 80s. And I feel like sneaker culture kind of won, like all the ideas that came out of sneaker culture, where you're taking, you're adding the story to component and creating these lifestyle shoes that were rooted in performance shoes. Like sneakers have taken over the world. Everybody wears sneakers now, whether you're a newborn baby or someone older and you're wearing Hoka and New Balance. But like, I feel like the culture is responsible for sneakers becoming this global phenomenon. I mean, unfortunately, I feel like it's always the case with subcultures that the people who are the originators and the ones who are responsible for creating all that excitement around the category are not compensated properly for all they were responsible for. But, we were discussing this on X yesterday, the whole idea of resale. I think you all know, like resale has always been around, right? Whether it's like you were tipping your guy at Foot Locker to hold on to a pair of Jordans for you, or, people who were like searching for grails in like old sporting goods stores and whatnot. And then the whole boutique culture began in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's evolved into something that is basically an industrial complex right now. And I think that's the part where people feel like, because it went online, because bots became involved, you really removed a human element, and it went from being something that felt artful and cultural to something that felt like entirely commerce based. So Virgil Abloh talks a lot about, to him, there's no difference between art and commerce. He feels like the line is blurred, but I think you can have too much art and you can have too much commerce. And I think when resale became something that was entirely online, entirely botted, and regular people could not participate, I think it went too far into the commerce place. I do actually think there's a reset going on where that's concerned. So.
Oh yeah, total reset going on right now.
Big
There's a lot of
time.
resale outfits who have gone out of business.
Yes.
Or they pivoted to now not just selling sneakers, they're selling luxury goods. I know of resale outfits who are doing sneaker trades for cars and electronics and all this other stuff just so that they can keep afloat. It has totally changed in that everything that you've just mentioned has led to all of the indicating factors that the commerce dominating element of resale has declined so rapidly.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and it was hyper commerce, because
Mhm.
you look at other collectible genres, you look at other subcultures and subgenres wrapped around getting something, and it was the getting of that thing. Sneakers went into buying them to sell them again. That was the pass through. Meanwhile, Sean, you and I are car guys. We search for our car to drive it, to have it, to own it. And
Yep.
sneakers never, that hyper commerce divulged into, I'm buying this on the off chance that I can sell it again immediately.
Mhm. And I
Yeah.
think the thrill of the hunt aspect narrative changed because we were forced into the thrill of the hunt before the internet.
Right.
Absolutely.
That was life. You
Yeah.
had to go to certain stores in certain cities to find out what was popping. You had to ask that guy who's dusty old sporting goods store, let me get down
Correct.
into the basement,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You
And
had to put in a whole lot of FaceTime, even just
right,
to grease the palm to get the Jordans. Like,
right,
you had to become part of the community. It
right.
wasn't easy
And that wasn't to sell. That was for, us
to have them.
making sure that we, it was the Indiana Jones effect. You know what I mean? The mission, we conquered, we got it, we wore them, like all of that.
Right.
And, the thrill of the hunt narrative changed into, the commerce aspect once people saw all of the numbers being reported on the growth of what happened in the sneaker industry. So, one of the things I think, Lois, we want to talk about is women in sneaker culture.
Yeah.
How's the role of women in sneaker culture, evolved? I mean, you're a right here living and breathing testament to a lane of, the business and culture that women have stepped both feet into and represented authentically. So how do you feel about where things are in 2025 and beyond?
Okay. I mean, I first want to say, as I was thinking about this interview, Dee, I want to give you kudos, because I feel like from the start, for as long as I've known you, you've always been very welcoming of women in sneaker culture. I remember those little online chats you used to hold. We would access them through Gmail or whatever. And I never felt like it was just like everybody was welcome to the table as long as they brought something to the table. And it wasn't about whether they were a man or a woman. I think what's in the early days of sneaker culture, it was harder for women to have a voice, in part just because I think they were often, brands would select who could be a part of the culture, and media platforms would select. And a lot of times, they were selecting people based on whether or not they were attracted to that person, not necessarily about how they were.
Yep.
But, I listen to a lot of earnings calls, and I can't count on all of, my hands and feet, the number of times I've heard brands talk about, we want to grow women's, we want to grow women's, we want to grow women's. And I think brands have come to understand that in order to do that, you have to bring women to, give them a seat at the table, the design table, the marketing table, and obviously the influencer table too. So I think things have gotten much better for women in sneakers. They're no longer like the token pretty girl. And I feel like there's more work to be done, of course. But I think there's been a lot of great progress, and I think there will continue to be progress because these brands want women as their customers. So it's,
It's an interesting jump off from that point. You mentioned influencer. We know what that culture is about in
right.
terms of attraction, in terms of those kind of
Yes.
things. Um, what do you think of the authenticity of a culture where the hype is so big? Do you think that almost detracts from what women really want to do and be involved in, and then the culture on the whole? Because influencer culture is so much about the hype right now
Yeah.
that it's very hard to find. I know people whose personalities are not like they are online simply so they can get the grab.
Yes.
The authenticity is gone in that digital sense,
Hmm.
but culture itself is actually built on authenticity.
Yes.
Where do you think we're headed with that?
I mean, I think people can they have a sense for who is authentic and who isn't authentic. So I think within sneakers, it's very hard to trick people. And I do think that the people who lack authenticity and are there for just a money grab, they do not last long. Like they get washed in and out of the culture very quickly. So, I think influencer marketing is a form of advertising that is not going away. And I think brands have become pretty astute at figuring out who is the best messenger for what it is they're trying to sell. But again, I think people recognize authenticity, and brands I think have become very good at recognizing who is authentic too. So I see less of a problem with that in sneakers. One thing I do see is that brands perpetually grind through influencers. So whoever was hot 5 years ago isn't hot now. Like all the brands work with that person and then they're out. So I would say, if you're getting into this game as an influencer, don't see it as a long-term career move because the brands they just grind through them.
That was going to be my next question of when does the culture divulge from the quick grab of, influencers do bring eyes, they do bring quick dollars into the space. And then the culture kind of wades off to the side to wait for that to burn through. Because we did mention there was a reset earlier.
Yeah. I wonder how the reset is going to impact influencer. I mean, obviously, if brands are seeing their sales deteriorate, obviously there's less budget for influencers. But I still feel like influencers are a very powerful way to speak to customers right now.
Yeah.
I don't see that changing anytime soon. Do you all think that's changing? Do you feel like?
I think it speaks to one of the next topics on trend. I think a lot of what we see, the hype of the influenced in reverse. It influenced that there's less design, there's less risk taking. They glom onto one thing like insects, and then we just eat it until it's dead.
Right.
And so Steven talked about that last show where there's Nike got surprised when On came on.
Right.
When these smaller brands who are willing to innovate and not be hyped came on and shocked everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
And I think that the cycle of the shelf life of the influencer is shorter.
Uh-huh. Oh,
It's
for sure.
definitely shorter. You know, there was some influencers who they'd be able to get a nice good run with multiple brands because once one brand picked them up,
Right. Everybody
you know,
would want.
a few other brands would pick them up, you know, but I think that that's really waning now where brands are developing a relationship with an influencer. It's for a specific campaign for a short duration of time, and then that's it, and on to the next. And then one
Yeah,
of
I
the
agree.
yeah, it was happening in what it's happening in what I also see is the dark horse that no one is talking about, and this is something that we teach here through our social studies education program is a brand can make their own influencer now with AI. They
Oh
don't
yeah.
necessarily need a real influencer
Yeah.
because now I can make one through
Right.
AI prompts and all
Yeah.
of the other amazing programs that exist and run that through my
Yeah.
influencer campaign.
We
And
fed
then
the
when I'm
algorithm. We have
right, the
fed the
algorithm,
algorithm what we want to see.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's been fed for years. So now the trend that's coming, mark our words, we have always been the harbingers of what's coming in this industry. Brands are going to start hiring people who can make influencers and run
Mm.
that whole thing through automated social media campaigns and pay for ads and everything and not need to talk to a single person. It's
Hmm.
coming.
Right.
Mm.
It is coming.
I could see them. I mean, they're definitely going to. Why wouldn't they at least experiment with that? Companies are always trying to cut back on labor costs, so that makes total sense.
Yep, it's totally coming. Brands are already working on it, without me trying to divulge too much, but there are brands who are already working on
Don't divulge, spill.
creating, to circumvent the real time in person influencer
Mm.
because
Well, you've already seen it on Instagram where they've run tests on AI to
Mm-hmm.
develop a personality and a persona and a
Yes.
face and a body, and then you find out that that's been AI all along, and they've got 1 million followers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But don't you think, and this is really I always say this is one of those questions that just popped up for me. There still needs to be the human element of someone who knows how to not only speak to human beings,
Absolutely.
connect to the heart, empathy, love, all that. There still needs to be human beings in that room who are working with the computers, with the AI and everything.
Here's the example I'll give as a designer because we've said this for decades now. There's an old adage that says the death of paper is in its next printing.
Mm.
It, we have books, I have shelves full of paper, and that was all supposed to be going away. We still like to sketch, we still like to touch, we still like to feel. And so I think that, yeah, all of the AI and computer tech is coming, it's here.
Yeah.
But you're right, Dee. The human element is always what we will go back to because we can feel the lack of soul in
Right.
those things.
that's right. So let's talk trends.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are we looking at for 2025 and beyond at this point, Lois? I mean, what kind of trends are we? What are you seeing? What are you predicting is going to
I mean,
happen?
I'm a very big cycle person.
Mm.
I think there's economic cycles, there's fashion cycles, and they kind of mirror each other. And I do think we passed into a new cycle 2, 3, 4 years ago. I think it was delayed a little bit by the pandemic, and everybody was still sitting home with extra money and their sweatpants on. But I think we're in this cycle, which is, I feel like there's two cycles. There's a more effusive, expressive, expansive cycle, which is lined up more with like athletic brands and logos and just celebration. And now we're in this quieter cycle, which has literally been called quiet luxury. And people are more open to the ideas of maybe wearing something other than sneakers, like a pair of loafers, or especially with women in their 20s and 30s, you've really seen them try to get back into ballet flats and other things besides sneakers. So one of the big trends that came with that was obviously the whole low profile sneaker trend. And I really do credit Bjorn of Adidas, when he came in, he sort of recognized that, and the team was kind of they're gonna like let it play out and be a little bit more sort of, let it take its time, the normal time. And I think his approach was like, let's jump all over this. And I think that's been a big boom for them. They've had huge success with Samba, and that's translated to a bunch of other silhouettes.
Yeah.
And it's created a nice little halo over the brand, which you guys were sort of discussing earlier when you were talking about Predator. I think they're going to have an amazing 2026, the way they're setting themselves up with soccer, because I hear they're taking a lot of share from Nike within the performance soccer space. So I think that's what we're seeing, is low profile kind of taking over the space. I think that's being expressed within sneaker culture with the success of the Samba, but also the retro running trends. So ASICS is having some success off of that.
I love that you mentioned that, because you actually mentioned something earlier about the ballet flat. You mentioned something earlier about everyone is wearing sneakers.
Right.
I think now some of those low profile trends have moved into the office. They've moved into dress up, into, a sort of evening wear. I can't tell you how many blazers I see with a pair of white Sambas.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so I think that low profile trend is also now less performance oriented and more fashion oriented.
Yes.
So ASICS did it years ago with the Onitsuka Tiger imprint.
Correct.
Yeah, shoes like the Mexico 66,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
like that
Absolutely.
have never waned in popularity. They just now are like,
They're
hey,
having a moment.
right? They're like, hey guys, we're still here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting sort of other side of that is I went to the running event in Austin. It's an event for Performance Run.
Yeah.
And first of all, like, everybody is descending on the performance run space and wants to be in that space.
Yeah.
And I had a theory that, like, if you have low profile lifestyle, that will roll into performance. But everybody I spoke to was like, no, it's all about cushioning. So that's a difference.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Because you can, it's like the super nerds who have the answers and all the tech and all the formulas. They can't see the forest through the trees often.
Okay.
So I think you're right. I'm one of those. I'm one of those who rolled his performance footwear into fashion. Sean, last time I was out there, I was rolling around in a pair of Adios Pro 3s, the all white ones.
Were.
Oh, absolutely.
Casually, yeah.
There's people wearing their Alpha Flies fashionably.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it might be about cushioning, but people are finding, as the street always does, they're finding a way to pull it into their world, because those are the only things with innovation going on right now.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is COVID got a lot of people into running.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which that transcended into people sort of subconsciously changing their state of dress and their preference on footwear, because their feet were being used more than they ever have before.
Right.
As opposed to the usual commute where, a city slickers, pick a major city USA.
Yeah.
Your footwear was based on the rough and tumble of your city and the obstacles and things you had to step through before you got to work.
Yep.
And that changed when people finally had to put on shoes that, number one, were comfortable, and number two, they were outside for a different reason after being inside all day.
Right.
So the thought process behind and the appreciation for comfortable footwear shot up, to the benefit of Crocs, to Hoka, to On, and all those folks. Like, even among the young kids now, they're still wearing Nike tech suits, but they're wearing Asics and New Balance.
Yes, they are.
And now there's a debate among the young kids, which one is better among Asics and New Balance now.
Right.
So look how far we've come in that. And Lois, this question is for you with regard to, even that example that I'm giving, the state of sneaker journalism. How has that changed in the advent of social media, where everyone has been empowered to, in their own way, become a journalist?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. All of you have seen sort of the rise and fall, right? Like I was working at Snobiety when it was like a skeletal crew, and then, it became this big global thing, and they were purchased by Zalando. We've seen like Hypebeast went public. I do think though we're now at a reset with all of these platforms. Um, Perhaps we don't need three major sneaker platforms. Time will tell. But something I've been very critical about on X, I've talked to quite a bit, is like all of these platforms, Hypebeast, Complex, Snobiety, are also agencies. So they do two things. They report on sneakers, and they do a good job of that, but they're also agencies, and they work with brands to help market them. And it does create a conflict, which I think has harmed their reputations for news reporting.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a big problem. Like you compare like a Complex or a Snobiety or a Hypebeast to the New York Times. A New York Times reporter, they can't take gifts, they can't take trips, they're not doing agency work. It's a very different mindset where journalism is concerned. And it ties their hands. Like myself and Kari, Sneaker Fetish, we reported on Adidas's collaboration with James Whitner's group, the Whitaker Group, and nobody else wanted to pick up the story. I think they just wanted to be cooperative and not like scoop his story. And that's not how journalism is done. And I think one of the reasons Substack has been successful is because people are willing to do like no holds bar journalism there. So that's a big change, I think. And it's not just sneakers. Like I see the same problems for all the fashion platforms too. They're all agencies. So
right. And what's interesting about that point you made is when we first launched this very talk show in 2007.
Yeah.
We were literally fed up with scrolling through all of the major sneaker blog sites and seeing nothing but Nike and Jordan coverage for miles on end. Every single post on all of these sites was Nike and Jordan. Right. Nobody cared about any other brand, even though they knew all the other ones existed. And to some degree, there was very significant, history and strides and numbers from those other brands. But for some reason, everyone just wanted to do that. So when we first launched, we didn't talk about, literally our run of show, we were like, we are not talking about Nike and Jordan unless it's something controversial or something that's newsworthy. We're not giving any extra hype because there's 18 other sites that'll do that. Yep. And if you still scroll through the archives of 2007 and 2008 on all of those sites and more, that's all you see. So we were fed up with the 25th anniversary of the Air Force One because we called it. They did too much.
Yep.
They spread themselves too thin. too many stories, slapped those stickers that didn't make sense just for the sake of it being the 25th anniversary. And even now in 2024, you can find sneakers sitting on the shelves in some stores in distant cities, dead stock from the 2007 25th anniversary.
Oh, interesting.
Dead stock. So I say that to say we wanted to, when we launched, have a high degree of integrity and parity and openness to what we were talking about, right? And I think that what I see right now, I think what we all see right now, you touched on it, in 2024 is with the success of quote unquote sneaker media, some of these outlets have purposely jumped into the space of conflict of interest because ad sales is down.
Yep.
And they decided to partner with some brands and say, hey, look, let us help you out with being able to sell that product. And it has totally washed away any objectivity and ethical reporting in sneakers. Yeah. It's, with the exception of a few outlets, it's gone.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no critical analysis of it.
None.
It's participation.
Even today, when I was listening to you talk about the NFL, I was a little taken aback. I was like, oh my God, they're like being kind of critical about the NFL and also like Nike's decision to renew. It was a little bit like disconcerting because I've become, you become accustomed to everybody just playing along, playing nice, and not sort of pushing back on Titans, basically, because you're fear that you're not going to cut the check,
Well, one of the things that we've always been prideful of, Lois, is the fact that no brand has ever been on our pocket,
Right.
number one. And then we have been established based on the very means of consumer power. There's literally between the three of us, and now if you add you here, probably over 15,000 pairs of sneakers over the last 40 years. So we've earned, all of us here,
Yes.
Oh yeah.
the right to say exactly
Yeah.
whatever it is we
Yeah.
want to say
We
about
purchased our ticket to entry.
right. So that's one of the things that we've been built and based on. So no brand has ever been able to have a conversation with us where they can sway us. You can't make a shoe to impress us anymore. We've owned them all.
Right.
So we love the aspects of the business that allow us to actually freely speak about what we see and what we thought would happen if things would have went differently. Like you just said, people will probably be surprised to hear us say, "Oh wow, like you guys went and did that for that long? Good luck to you, though."
Right.
But
Where
that's how you make improvements. Sycophantic behavior doesn't improve this culture that we claim to love so much.
Correct.
We're killing it by kissing the ring, only ever doing that.
Right. 100%.
So you hinted at it in your conversation, in our conversation a little bit, Lois, about collaborations.
Yes.
I'm stealing Steve's question here.
Yeah, go right ahead.
How do you feel about the current state of collaborations in the sneaker business?
I mean, it's become very formulaic, for sure. I think it's just become the norm. I mean, I will tell you, like when I first started writing for High Snobiety, we would have to scramble around to find things to write about, right? Like there were barely any collaborations. Like it was hard. And now, of course, like it's overwhelming the number of collaboration. It's just like a normal part of how these brands do business. In fairness, I will say, like my last shoe purchase was a collaboration between New Balance and the photographer from the Bronx, Renelle Medrano. So they do still get me. Like I have to say, like I am susceptible to the collabs sort of hype, and the wish to have a sneaker that is a little different. But clearly it's lost its effectiveness, and I don't know where things go next. I'm very curious what you all think, like about.
You mentioned the sort of quiet luxury.
Yeah.
Do you feel that collaborations done in a certain silo are a little more desirable versus just the broad-based find a celebrity X brand?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Is it more about that silo? Because I find myself searching for that quiet luxury collaboration that might leak into my sneaker love, but also my fine goods love as an older sneakerhead now.
Like, give me an example of a recent one that's been attractive to you.
I'll give you one.
I see what Stella McCartney and Y3 doing with Adidas
Okay.
as a quiet luxury collab, because
For sure.
it's now an elevated station, but it's still a collaboration. They're still just taking Ultra Boosts and making them better.
Right.
But it's not seen as a collaboration as much as a level up.
Right.
Right. Well, I'll give you an example. You mentioned New Balance, right?
Yeah.
How about the Loro Piano New Balance collaboration?
I mean, that was crazy to me. I'm not a huge New Balance fan. Like, although I have to say, like they've gotten me. Like I bought you know what I'm saying? Like they're doing so well that I'm actually buying New Balance shoes. Like I bought Joe Fresh Goods. Of course, I want to own something that he's designed. And then Charlotte Lee is a women's designer. Like I think the 327 was brilliant. Is that, you know what I'm saying? So they got me. But did you like the Loro Piana one? I thought that struck me as nuts.
Well, you hinted on quiet luxury, which is why I brought it up.
Yeah.
So that's one of those you need to know in order to appreciate that shoe, number one. And number two, it was a $1,200 shoe.
Exactly.
Wow. So that's, we bring up quiet luxury. I think number one, quiet luxury is one of those things that people have to evolve to. So in order to appreciate that, what materials Loro Piana puts into their apparel, which now translated to New Balance, right? For $1,200, right? Like it's just like a $1,200 New Balance. That like retail at $1,200, not resell. It retail at $1,200, right?
Wild. Which is
so
wild.
So with quiet luxury, if that's going to be a new trend, right? Where do you think a brand needs to effectively do that kind of thing in terms of resonation with the consumer? Because sneakers are one of those things where everybody wants to own a certain shoe where it's like, oh, y'all are not up on this. Right? Where do you think that a brand needs to approach that?
I mean, I like, you mentioned Loro Piana, but I thought that one was crazy, but I thought Mui Mui's collaboration with New Balance was on point and amazing. And I think what Mui Mui did that I think is a little different is they introduced this new material story, the brown suede. And again, it was a low profile shoe. So I think that felt very different. I was talking to actually a buyer for a big chain. We were talking about Nike, and she was saying something Nike could do is like what is it? The knit FlyKnit. She was like, if they want to get into low profile, they could reintroduce FlyKnit and use a new material story and a new color story. She was kind of surprised how sort of how they themselves weren't coming to the table with these types of creative ideas. So I think you can create newness by collaboration still, but also trying to focus on creating like a new story that feels like it's relevant in 2024, whether through materials or slight changes or whatnot. Like, I don't know. I think there's. Go ahead.
No, that's where I like the sort of implanted the sort of brand implant of Estella,
right.
Where her brand story, she's deconstructionist to a shoe that's already 180. It already has a performance base. And then she deconstructs, reconstructs. So the story is there. I think exactly what you're saying is right.
Yeah.
There has to be a reason and a story behind it.
Right.
And it can have the basis of what that brand, the original brand was, but it has to be brave enough to jump off the cliff
and do something different. Going to the running event, it made me realize that people want something. They want their shoe to have there to be some substance to the shoe. Like, you're putting something in there where there's technology. You all mentioned On before. They're building these beautiful uppers. I think to just sort of like do a collaboration of an old, say, Air Max 95, and all you do is change the colors. Like, I think we're past that. You have to bring a little something different to the table. I mean, one of the reasons I liked that New Balance shoe with Rennell, it was like a low profile outdoor silhouette, So, bring some new things to the table, bring some technology to the table. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
But is the innovation, there, like at the running event, did you see some new innovation that made you say, this will be interesting to see how the runners respond to it?
I mean, I think they're working like Hoka sort of opened the door to all these ultra cushion shoes. And then Nike did the same with carbon plates and whatnot. But I do think like there is a focus on creating that channel is so like so growing in such a great place of growth right now. So they'll be like, okay, we made a shoe for the marathon runner. Now we got to make a shoe for the ultra marathon runner. So there's a lot of diversification in creating shoes for very specific performance silos. So in that way, they're taking these carbon plates, which I don't know much about, to be honest, and ultra cushioned and innovating them so you can use them in different ways, in different sports.
So Lois, here's the $15 million question.
All right.
What did Skechers reveal at the running show?
I mean, they want to be a player in the space. They had a big booth there.
They're coming with it.
Yeah, they are. Like, they're also in soccer. But I think they're going to have a very difficult time breaking into the run specialty channel. I think that's like 400 or 500 doors. Those guys have everyone beating down their doors. Their brands, you know, they already have like Hoka, Brooks, On, Saucony, Asics. Like Nike's not even in the top 5 in that space. So imagine Skechers trying to enter into that space. But, you know, Skechers right now has a takedown of On's shoes, and I'm hearing those are super successful. So Skechers knows who their customer is. It's somebody who isn't willing to pay more than $60, $70 for a sneaker, but still wants a shoe that has performance elements and is comfortable. Nike created the whole slip-in shoe and went nowhere with it. And Skechers took the idea and created an entire new business out of it.
That part. Skechers is like that person who's been talked bad about, so you can't make them feel bad.
Right.
You can't talk bad about them. They
put on
have
their
a clean
armor.
slate. Yeah, they have a clean slate every single time. And they eat it up because they know where they've come from. Yeah. You can't call them a knockoff. You can't call them this and that because they know they did that.
Right.
And now they're innovating in the space of what I call the democratization of shoe tech, of run tech, where these things aren't hidden behind closed doors anymore. There's factory direct brands that I talk about on my YouTube channel that are selling direct to consumer through Instagram ads, and they've got all the same tech, the foam, the carbon, the upper.
Oh, that's wild.
And they're going straight to the consumer. They don't care to beat Nike. They just want to sell their shoes because Nike's already made money off of that factory.
Right.
So the factory says, we have all the stuff. Let's do it.
Let's go.
Wow.
And that's where Skechers is at, where you can't make them feel bad.
Absolutely.
Well, let's do the reset on Skechers though, right? Mm-hmm. Their demographic is 51 to 70.
Right.
Number one. They're the number 2 sneaker company in America, purely just sneakers. They've had that title for a very long time now. Mm-hmm. And number 3, they've had runners win big marathons at least 3 times in Skechers. I think Med Keflezighi won the New York City Marathon twice in Skechers.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this was prior to their innovations.
Right. This was prior to the pushes. This was they secretly had the running performance division before it was well known.
Yep.
And that was when they were actually secretly trying out basketball shoes too. There were basketball shoes in the wild too. Yep. But I think, again, these are the kind of stories, Lois, you can appreciate in that we're not trying to find the everyday and spin it and remix it to have a conversation with a few different nouns and verbs, right?
Right.
Our goal and our motto has always been 3 words, right? Appreciate, educate, elevate, right? And to be able to have someone like you on and have those conversations about these things without feeling like we're talking over somebody's head, we enjoy it, right? We enjoy those, right? So, even with that, our question here, we're talking about tech and, we're talking about materials and carbon and everything else. I'm stealing another one of Steve's questions. He had all the good questions.
Let's go, Steve.
Sustainability is becoming more of a focus.
Yeah.
Which brands do you see or do you think are on the right track with going there without, constant battle with greenwashing? Who's genuinely and effectively playing in sustainability for sneakers right now?
I mean, I think they're all like it's all greenwashing, you know, like so I think, to be honest, like it seemed as though Nike was trying to move in that direction, but it's almost as though they've seemingly abandoned that. But without picking on Nike, because I think a lot of the brands are guilty of that. I did like what I saw On doing at the running event. They displayed that shoe that is being, made with the. Do you guys know how to describe that?
With the woven printing, like
Yes.
almost
Yeah.
like
I mean, I think as a European shoe brand, they seem to be legitimately invested in sustainability and sustainable practices. So I would give them that crown. What do you guys think? I'm very curious about.
I think you said one word that most footwear people won't pick up on, and you said European. Having lived in Europe, I've seen how very serious they take their recycling efforts.
Yeah.
And it's because, coast to coast here, we have so many resources in such a big country. We don't have to take it seriously yet.
Right.
As a society, they've been through 3,000 years of every famine and destruction you can think of. They really do take their recycling efforts seriously,
Right.
because you've got most of the world's nations sitting right there.
Yeah.
At least the industrialized nations. And so, yeah, I think some of those, the On came on very big as a Swiss brand. You've got a lot of Swedish brands and Northern European brands who are innovating around that space of reuse and longevity of their product. So, yeah, I think we talk about culture a lot. I think the American culture also sways how we see some of that, because you're the second one in a row. Steven said the same thing. Everyone's greenwashing here.
Yes.
Well, I think if I have to pick a brand that I think is getting it right and is constantly transparent about being a work in progress, and I like what they've done in the space already, it's Veja.
Oh, of course, definitely.
Because not only have they decided to go down into the Amazon and source materials naturally and try to, from their experience as being corporate sustainability consultants before they saw all of the craziness that was going on that is today called greenwashing, they said we want to do this ethically and sustainably, but we also want to implement a fair trade practice.
Right.
So I think if I have to give anyone like kudos for where they are right now, it would be them, because this is the other part that I like about their transparency. Every shoe Veja makes isn't a sustainably made shoe, but they've taken shoes in their line that aren't, and they've made those projects to continue to work on in the future. So one version of a shoe that isn't sustainably made, they're currently working on making sure the next version is, or at least some components.
And they're European based too, aren't they?
From Paris.
Yeah.
So they are constantly a work in progress,
right,
and being transparent about the fact that they don't always get it right. And I think that that's one of the truer definitions of a move to sustainability that you can have, as opposed to, we can call them out, Nike, acting like they've got it figured out. Adidas has made a great effort with their partnership with Parley for the Oceans since 2015, right? D, what was the last shoe that we put in the Rise of Sneaker Culture exhibition in the Brooklyn Museum? It was the Ultra Boost that was revealed at the United Nations with the Parley for the Oceans announcement. They revealed that sneaker, not in the sneaker blogs, not in any footwear media. They unveiled that sneaker at the United Nations.
Yeah, that was huge.
And then we made it as the final shoe that made it into the Rise of Sneaker Culture exhibition at the Brooklyn Museum. It was literally the very last sneaker to make it in. Right.
Amazing.
And they've been on this journey since then of trying to move to making sure they replace all of their polyesters with Parley for the Ocean recycled ocean plastic, which I believe the goal was 2024. I have to check and see if they've actually announced that they've achieved that goal.
And one thing I like that they've also done is, after you've done it, stop talking about it. It's like filming yourself feeding a homeless person soup. Like, stop filming it and just do it. I like that Adidas has they started out by talking about it. Now it's just in there. It's the norm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Interesting.
So those would be the two companies that I have to say,
Okay.
I'm going to put them on top right now among everybody else who's been making the play. Like, we could honorable mention Allbirds, but the problem with a company like Allbirds is they have, since they launched, talked to the exact same consumer that has been buying since they launched in 2016. That white male and his girlfriend who are between 30 and 40. And they have not taken any effort to grow into a new consumer other than that scandal with the Jeff Staple Pigeon collaboration that
Right.
funny enough ended up on StockX minutes before it was available on the Allbirds website. But we're not going to talk about that.
Wow. And I think a lot of that original Allbirds customer he's now wearing on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
They've
they
moved on.
transitioned, and that's partly because the Allbirds weren't comfortable. So
Oh.
on met they met that same demographic and gave them a bump in performance.
Hmm.
Yeah, man. Things have changed. Things
Yeah.
have changed.
Yes, they have. So now let's shift. We've talked almost a little bit of doom and gloom. Straight up, we're all sneaker loving people here. What is a grail for you? What is a grail you might be missing in your collection?
Okay. I mean, my all-time favorite sneaker designer is Virgil. I'm a huge Virgil Abloh fan. I'm not objective where he's concerned. And I honestly feel like some of the demise of the culture came about because he died. I feel like he was such an important leader and commentator and curator. But that's another conversation. But it goes back to probably the one shoe that I don't own and I'd like to own, and maybe I will still own, is the off-white Nike Shocks. I loved that particular from his 10 designs. That was my favorite. I'd be curious if you guys had a favorite from that collection. And then my other favorites are just memory based, like Married to the Mob did a Nike collaboration, and we were invited to a party where we were able to design a shoe, and I picked an Air Max 90, I think it was, and I sat with a Nike designer, and he helped me design it, and has my name on it, and it's just a nice memory of Married to the Mob and Nike and all that. You know how it is, like it's really the memory. And then this is going to be a weird one, but I was friendly with John Epstein. He was the CEO of Fila. And if you all, I'm sure, remember that the Disruptor had like a moment, that sneaker.
Yeah.
And he gave me a pair, and I will never get rid of those. They'll sit in my closet probably. But he, by the way, passed away at far too young age. So rest in peace, John. I miss him. He was always super fun.
Agreed.
And then the last one, I loved Melody's Air Jordan 1. I think she did a fabulous job, and I love that shoe to death. So those are 4. The one being the Shocks that I don't own yet, but I probably
that's very cool.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, the 97 from Virgil's 10 collection was the one. That's the one I wish I could get my hands on.
Okay.
Did you ever get to share that with Virgil before his passing?
No, I did not. I mean, I didn't know him personally, so.
Okay.
Did you guys have conversations with him?
I never got to.
Okay.
The conversation that I remember, and I didn't know who he was, and this is where it gets kind of crazy. In Chicago, a Soul Collector event at Nike Town, Chicago in 2005 or 2006. I get hazy on the date. And this is when there was the midst of a snowstorm, and we finally convinced the folks at Nike Town to let everyone in to get out of the snow. It was snowing like crazy. And then in comes Kanye. Not many people knew who he was. I knew who he was only because of people in the music industry. And he had this group of four guys with him,
Right.
decked out Jordan 3s, black cements, and Jordan 1s. And lo and behold, Virgil was there.
Interesting.
I didn't know who he was, didn't, but what I did notice, of course, the obsessed person that I am with sneakers, I did notice his sneakers. And he was wearing Jordan 1s. He wasn't wearing the 3s. Kanye was wearing the Jordan 3s, black cements. And I just was like, those are dope. And that was really it. Didn't
Right.
share a word, didn't shake his hand, nothing. So then fast forward many years later and seeing photos of him with the crew, I was like, oh, that's Virgil. Okay. And I would hear his name being dropped
Yeah.
in songs as well, again, on some of Kanye's earlier production. So again, you never know someone who you'll run into and meet. It's just like, again, Tommy Rebel and Just Blaze pulling up to a Nike
Right.
Town event in New York
Right.
City. And
Right.
everyone's like, who are these guys? Because they both happen to be wearing, Just Blaze was wearing a Snow Beach jacket. And that's what grabbed people's attention. And I'm like, but you don't know who that is. And this is Just Blaze with dreads. This is not,
Right.
So again, you never know who and what sneakers will do. Just like many of us, right? We meet people because of the sneakers.
For sure.
We look at their shoes and you're like, okay, nice shoes. You may make a comment, you compliment them,
Right.
smile at them, thumbs up, whatever it may be. And that just begins the start of who knows where that conversation may lead. So rest in peace to Virgil Abloh, because I still find some of his missives that he wrote on his website so important that a lot of people can learn from in this day and age.
I think that's the point. I think he was as much a journalist as he was a designer. The way that he documented that process and the way he saw things, I'll admit, as a designer, all designers are competitive with each other, whether we know it or not, whether we admit it or not. So early on, I would look at his designs and I would scratch my head and I would get so mad. I'm like, why is everybody so hyped about what he's making? But it was the commentary that went along with what he was making that made it important. And that's where I became a fan, is more in his writings and his thinkings about how the culture was being consumed, how it was being built. That became the thing that I researched, even posthumously, in his passing, to go back all the way back to the Pyrex days and just be like, he got what so many designers were going for, and what Steven talked about last episode, of being brave, jumping off that cliff, standing on that precipice of wanting to do something completely different.
Yeah. No, he was, you're right. He was a documenter of the culture for sure.
All right. So, as you know, Lois, we're also educators here.
Okay.
And I think, of course, this entire episode could be a masterclass on a bunch of things, because that's just how we do it. And we're very thankful for you joining us
Absolutely.
in being a guest to continue that tradition. We have a final question that we want you to be as unadulterated and raw and real deal brass tacks as possible about.
Okay, I'm ready.
Especially considering what we mentioned earlier about sneaker journalism. So we want you to give some advice to an aspiring sneaker journalist. What would you give as advice to that up and coming writer who wants to cover sneaker culture authentically and effectively?
I think you have to be engaged on social media. You have to pick your channel, but you need to be engaged with, because I think a lot of the discussion around the culture is taking place on social media. I happen to be on X, but Instagram too. I think TikTok's about to be shut down, so who knows with that. But I do think you need to be engaged online, but in life too, like visit stores. And I think, report on what you're seeing, what you care about, what you're passionate about. If you're able to be consistent, I think Substack can be a place to start growing your voice and doing your citizen reporting. The one thing I will say though, beyond just being engaged and being consistent and finding your niche and the things that you feel passionate about, when you want to report on a rumor, try it, like as a journalist, you should have backup for what you're saying. So like say I heard such and such, then find another separate person that can confirm that that rumor is true. I've seen a lot of people do like citizen reporting, especially on fashion Twitter, where they're like, oh, I heard blah, blah, blah. Like, and so many of those rumors turn out to be not true. And I think that's one of a critical rule of journalism. You don't have to go to school for it, but if you're going to report on rumors, try and get confirmation from a separate person. I think that's a really important rule of journalism. Again, when we were reporting on adidas and the Whitaker Group's collaboration, Kari came to me with a tip, and I immediately reached out to a couple of different people so we could confirm it and feel good about it. If I hadn't been able to do that, I wouldn't have written about it. So that's my tips.
Nice.
Is just as an add-on, the rush to be first? Do you feel that's everyone wants to be, the breaker of news?
Yeah.
The rush. How hard is it though to do just that? You had to do that with that Adidas story, and I remember reading about it on X. So thank you for that. And it was so interesting because no one touched it. And
I know. It was ridiculous.
It's crazy. The rush to be first is not always good because it doesn't lend to authenticity. It's just rush to be first.
And also, I'd add to that, D, is the rush to be first still a thing?
Yeah.
Now that people are so close to information, is it equally as good to be best or most complete?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would ask you all that because, I think everybody in this room, you sometimes get like inside secret information, and like there is that sort of internal conflict I have sometimes where I'm like, do I want to ruin this for this brand? Because obviously they want to roll it out in their own way. And I mean, there's definitely been instances where I try to, like, I don't report on something because I'm like, let them roll that story out how they want to. I mean, I'm sure you guys go through that same sort of, right?
We've almost always opted for being complete over being first.
Right.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you look at the evolution of sneaker journalism, just that particular lane of journalism. The one thing I don't see that has evolved, which you are speaking to, is the journalistic integrity that a lot of these folks who run these sites were never trained in. Like you just gave a couple of examples of exercising editorial discretion.
Yes.
That is lacking from a lot of sneaker journalist websites and social media.
Right.
So when you look at what happened in the early 2000s with the boom of all these sneaker blogs, these weren't journalists. These were a bunch of people who were just into shoes and ended up having access to shoes early, or even, not to blame the brands, but the brands were putting exclusive product and information in the hands of people with no journalistic integrity whatsoever.
Yes.
And it snowballed.
Yes.
So I would like for you, Lois, to speak to, like, at least plant a seed and a gem out there for folks to exercise some journalistic integrity with their information.
I mean, I think you have to be. I think, Steve, you were right before. Like, you don't like the create a reputation for providing quality information that's meaningful, and has a reason for being. If you have a reputation for just blurting out the first thing you hear, and sometimes it turns out to be true, and sometimes it turns out to be false, like, you know, you will, your reputation will be impacted by that. And I think your reputation for integrity and thoughtfulness is everything. You know, it's super meaningful. And if you start getting reputation for being thoughtless and not caring and only worried about clicks, like that's your social currency will decline very rapidly.
Right.
So.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Really appreciate that, Jim. So what do you want to put out there for what's coming up for Lois and Snobette in 2025?
You know, with Snobette, we've always had one single goal, and that is to cover the streetwear and sneaker space through a women's lens. And, you know, we've always wanted to provide a platform for women to discuss their achievements or highlight their achievements. So we'll continue to do that. We're going to, you know, every year we do a top 10 sneaker list, and that always includes a panel of 5 women who give their top 5 sneakers. So that's something that I'll be working on right now, scrambling to get it done before December 31st, but that's what we'll continue to do.
Awesome.
Sure.
Very nice. Very nice.
Awesome. Love to hear it.
Awesome.
And thank you for all you do, you know, for the very, you know, tenured time that you've been doing it. We thank you and we appreciate you, and we want you to keep going, and we want you to know that you have our support in any and all endeavors to continue your mission, Lois. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. This has been a blast, and it's a huge honor to be on here, and so fun to chat with you, Dee. It's been too long.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. Thanks for giving us your time.
Yeah.
You know, as we always say, you know, you don't have to be a stranger. You can certainly come back, keep, you know, connected as we are, offline, online, all that good stuff. And, you know, the OSD Talk Show is just that. It's all about the community that we are part of, not just what we build it and sustain it, but more importantly, we live it, breathe it. We want to elevate it. We want to educate people. We want to introduce people to people like you, who they may have never interacted with before, but now they get to put a face with the name and emoji or X account. So certainly appreciate you and your time and all that you do. So
thanks, Dave.
And with that, people, as we always would say on every talk show, keep your laces tight tightly, your tongue loose, and walk good.